Hey, I'm Nikki, and this is the most overlooked skill for a tour guide. I'm often asked what makes an excellent tour guide. And historical knowledge aside, because I think we can all agree that the bare minimum for a guide is to know things, there are a lot of traits and skills that make a great tour guide, to be honest. Every guide is very different, and that very long list can be split into generally two main categories: personality and things that come with experience. But if I had to sum it up into one skill that I think is the most useful to a guide, I would say, and this should not come as a surprise, empathy. Empathy is, of course, the ability to understand the feelings of someone else, and it's often simplified to that thing that makes you good with people, right? But it's much more nuanced than that. And excellent guides use empathy in multiple ways during a tour. So, in this article, I'll list all the ways excellent guides utilize their fine tuned empathy on their tours. Number one, keeping a group happy every time. Taking into consideration that any group might have diverse cultural and social backgrounds, knowing when someone is unhappy isn't as simple as it sounds. Every guide has had that guest who laughed at their joke, smiled the entire time, and then went home to write a horrible review, right? It's frustrating, but it happens. But when guides use empathy to get to know their group and understand that people show and communicate their emotions in different ways, they can combat that, no matter what the situation or how upset the guest is about whatever. It can always be solved if you get ahead of it. Number two, balancing guests' expectations with education. For the majority of my guiding career, I would tell my guests how horrible Times Square was. I would mourn our city's golden age of theater. I would lament the invasion of chain restaurants. I thought this was important for them to know, as they wanted to understand the real New York City, right? I now use this as a cautionary tale when I train guides. As guides, we need to both educate guests while still being understanding of their context. In this case, that would mean acknowledging that the one theater-loving guest might have dreamed their entire lives of standing in Times Square, surrounded by the lights of Broadway, right? You gotta let them have their moment. And it's entirely possible to let them have that moment, celebrate the history of Times Square, and still making sure they don't eat at any of the chain restaurants, right? And I personally have found the best way to achieve this is through gentle education, which I will link to in the article. And finally, number three, answering rude and or ignorant questions with a smile on your face. This is something some guides are very good at and something that is much harder for the rest of us. Just the fact of the matter is, in some cultures, in order to understand how to address someone properly, you need to know their age and marital status. For example, right? It's one specific culture. In other cultures, asking someone's age or any other personal questions is considered incredibly rude, right? So that doesn't work. Some countries also have very little access to information about other areas of the world and can only rely on fictionalized movies for a peek into these other cultures, right? And it's only when guides are empathetic to the reality that their guests often look through the world with an entirely different lens than they do, that they can then take questions objectively and non-personally. I'm a big proponent of guides' responsibility to use this educational platform they have for good. However, the best of guides understand how to read that audience, how to best get that point across, and how far they'll actually be able to expand the audience's horizon within that one experience.